Until Dawn was a game that had an interesting development. What started as a PlayStation Move game for the PlayStation 3 became one of the greatest sleeper hits on the PlayStation 4 when it finally arrived in 2015. Until Dawn was sent out to die with seemingly low expectations and little marketing, but blew in popularity thanks to Twitch streams and streamers. This not only benefited Sony, but developer Supermassive Games as well. The two created an expanded universe of PlayStation VR games with Until Dawn Rush of Blood and a prequel called The Inpatient. Supermassive Games would take this success and make the Dark Pictures anthology and a successor called The Quarry. Now Sony has decided to revisit Until Dawn with a new, updated version of the game. Rebuilt from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5, Until Dawn is now available for the PlayStation 5 and PC. I like to think of this so-called remake/upgrade remaster as a director's cut. A number of new scenes have been added while others have been expanded, giving us better insight to certain characters and the overall story. With a new graphics engine, everything has a massive overhaul. Characters look more realistic and environments look more alive. Details like the killer's mask and the Wendigos look far better and creepier than before. And there are now new items and clues to discover, while some existing clues have been moved to new areas. Though that blue hue that added to the cold atmosphere of the original is gone and greatly missed. As I was playing through the game and ultimately finishing it, I don't feel like this new version of Until Dawn is worth the $60 price tag. Unlike some other remakes, yes, there is new content to sort of justify it. But $60 feels like a lot to ask when you can get the original for cheap. Plus, the original still looks and plays really well. I encountered multiple glitches, one that forced me to restart an entire chapter. Let alone the new Don't Move sections are very frustrating with the DualSense controller. Because the vibrations are so strong, even holding the controller still, it led to a number of fails in-game. One that ended up killing a character. Turn that setting low, or as I did, turn it off because it will save you a lot of frustration. If you're a diehard fan, or maybe a new player, go and buy this game. But otherwise, I recommend getting this game on sale for a cheaper price. The new additions are nice, but it's also more of the same, and almost a bit too much of a good thing. I think for an interactive game like Until Dawn, there's only so much you can do. Only so many times you can replay this before it just gets stale. But let's face it, this was only made for a certain number of reasons, the first being more money. People love the original. Chances are they'll buy it again, and what better way than to expand this to new platforms like the PlayStation 5 and PC. And with an Until Dawn movie coming out in 2025, PlayStation can easily wrap this game into its marketing. You've seen the movie, now play the game that inspired it all. So if you happen to have played the Until Dawn remake and had Sam survive through the entire game, you are treated to a brand new ending after the credits. This takes place a number of years later and now sees Sam living in Los Angeles. It's here we see her suffering from the trauma of that night, which considering everything she saw and possibly witnessed, I think is completely understandable. But the scene ends with this weird shaped wound on Sam's arm, something that seemingly wasn't there before. Basically, this hints at what can be assumed to be a sequel to Until Dawn. Otherwise, what's the point in bringing back the actress to develop this brand new scene? But then this made me question, do we really need a sequel to Until Dawn? I think because the original game never alluded to a sequel, the fact that a sequel is most likely coming feels forced. This is creating something that was never there. And that's the problem with most sequels. There's always another story to tell. You can always think of something new, but that doesn't mean it should happen. When it does, creativity loses some kind of freedom. But that's what happens when money is involved. It's why television shows last longer than they should, why we get endless sequels and prequels to movies that shouldn't have them, and why video game characters and stories are rarely allowed any kind of satisfying conclusion. Not everything is meant to continue. Until Dawn is like Heavy Rain or Detroit Become Human, games where the story is heavily based on player choice. Your choices dictate what direction the story goes in, the relationships between characters, and, more importantly, decides who lives and who dies. Everyone is going to get a different story. A character could die and your story continues. There is no game over, and that death will forever haunt you because that's the story your choices dictated. Take Telltale's The Walking Dead for example. It lasted for 4 seasons, and while not as extreme as those other games, your choices also determine the story. But the issue I always had with Telltale's The Walking Dead was how each new season would undo the choices you made in the previous season. That could mean characters dying right away, location changes, anything to start fresh, and in a way is kinda like a slap in the face. So for Until Dawn to have a sequel, that means if Sam died in your playthrough, that is impossible. That is now a what-if scenario. Which also means, what other choices would the sequel consider right and wrong? Would there be different variations? Would the sequel even attempt at even trying to mention previous events, and how deep would they go into that? All that said, I do believe Until Dawn can be expanded as a franchise. We saw it with The Inpatient, but a sequel is unnecessary, and in doing so, there is a certain way it has to be done. It needs to push the series forward while respecting the choices players made. It can be exciting to see that your choices mattered, but if your story was different and one or many characters died, it changes that entire perspective. Otherwise, what's the purpose of a game where your choices dictate what direction the story goes in? Sony is trying to make something into a franchise that really can't be turned into a franchise, and even so, I think it's many years too late. Or if it can, it needs to have a completely new story with new characters, with little to no references to the original. Maybe take inspiration from the Dark Pictures anthology, but make it better. The only reason this is happening is because of the movie. If that does well, you know Sony will push a sequel, and if there's an Until Dawn sequel to base this on, that makes having a movie sequel much easier. And once again, tie the sequel into the movie's marketing and make more money. I could have my doubts on the sequel, think it's pointless, but it turns out to be really good, and this whole discussion was for nothing. Sometimes it happens. Or maybe I'm actually right. Who knows, I would love to be surprised. In terms of this remake, the new additions may be welcoming, but as someone who bought the game and played it in its entirety, it's not worth it, especially full price. Like I said, wait till it's cheaper because honestly, this is one of the most pointless remakes / enhancements, and it probably says a lot that this new version of Until Dawn sold less than Concord. What are your thoughts on Until Dawn's PlayStation 5 remake? Have you played it? And do you think Until Dawn needs a sequel? Let us know down in the comments. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell to be notified about future content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.